Hello Year 6 and welcome to Lesson 2 Literacy for this week. Now I'm looking forward to this lesson because we're going to be working on something new, which is semicolons. Now I'm unsure if you've maybe done this possibly in Year 5, but we definitely haven't learnt about semicolons in Year 6. So hopefully by following this video and having a go at the task later, you will learn how to use a new piece of punctuation. So first of all, what is a semicolon? A semicolon is a pause in a sentence and it is stronger than a comma but weaker than a full stop. Now if you have a look at the characters in the bottom right hand screen, semicolon is the one in the middle and it looks like a comma with a full stop on the top of it. So it's weaker than a comma but it's stronger than a comma but weaker than a full stop. So rule 1, the semicolon can be used instead of a full stop. So it can be used to link two complete sentences together and join them to make one sentence. The semicolon can be used instead of a connective to join the sentences together. So in example 1, if we have a look at this original sentence, the door swung open and a masked figure strode in. We've got the two simple sentences of the door swung open, a masked figure strode in, and we're using the connective and to join them. Now, if we're going to use a semicolon instead, you're replacing that connective, you're replacing the word and you're using the semicolon. So, as we've adjusted that sentence, it's now, the door swung open, a masked figure strode in. It's stronger than a comma. Now, why we may use it instead of a comma can depend on how detailed those sentences are. So thinking about the adjectives that you've used in the sentences, sometimes when we've got lots of commas listing adjectives, to then use a comma to join those sentences together, it can become quite hard to read sometimes. So a semicolon is used instead of a comma when the sentences are quite detailed. So let's have a look at example 2 and 3. So example 2, Alex bought a toy car. He played with it as soon as he got home. And example 3, she was very tired, she had worked late the night before. We're using that semicolon instead of a connective and we're using it to join those two sentences together. Now, a general rule is as long as the second sentence after the semicolon links back to the first sentence, then it's correct, it works. Okay, so for example 3, she was very tired, she had worked late the night before. The second sentence after the semicolon, she had worked late the night before, links to the first sentence. It links to she was very tired. Now, would this make sense? She was very tired. She was having strawberries for pudding. No, not really. Okay, the second sentence doesn't link to the one before the semicolon, so make sure that they're connected. After listening to some of the rules I've shared with you there, I'd like you to have a go now. So on the screen there is going to be some sentences where you need to add a semicolon in. So if you pause the video here, have a look at those sentences and have a think about where you think the semicolon needs to go. Okay, pause. Okay, Year 6, I hope that went quite well. If you have a look at the screen now, they are going to have the answers up, okay, and this shows in green colour where the semicolon should be. So if we just look at, let's go to the second one. John opened the drawer, it was empty. So we've got that semicolon in the middle there to connect the two sentences together. We're using the semicolon instead of a connective. The original sentence could have maybe been, John opened the drawer and it was empty. John opened the drawer, however, it was empty. But instead of that connective, we're using the semicolon. Okay, when you're ready, we're going to move on to the next slide. If you need to pause so you can check your answers, then you can pause. Now, a semicolon can also be used in a descriptive list. This is rule 2. Usually we use commas in a list. However, when we describe each item in the list in more detail, the sentence becomes much longer and it means that semicolon's more appropriate. It makes it easier to break those clauses down and for us to actually understand the sentence. So on the screen you should see a sentence. Okay, I've put before because we're going to up level it and see the improvements after. So before. At the circus we saw a clown, a lion, a fire eater and an 8-year-old acrobat. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at what happens when we up level these sentences to have more detail, and we're going to replace some of the commas with semicolons. At the circus we saw a clown juggling with swords and daggers, a lion who stood on a ball, a fire eater with flashing eyes, and an 8-year-old acrobat. So if we have a look at the first part of that sentence, in the before, in the original sentence, it was just, at the circus we saw a clown, comma. Okay, we've now up-leveled that to include more detail. So we've got, at the circus we saw a clown juggling with swords and daggers. Now a semicolon is going to become more appropriate because a comma is weaker. So as we have more detail in that sentence, the weaker punctuation is going to be difficult to see those clear clauses. So a semicolon makes it much clearer. It's a stronger piece of punctuation, but it's not as strong as a full stop. So we're not pausing after with swords and daggers, full stop. No, we're using a semicolon to break up that list. Now I'd like you to have a go now at making this sentence more detailed, and you're going to replace the commas with semicolons. So the original sentence is, in London we saw a bus, a boat, a bridge and the Shard. Now I'd like you to add more details about those different nouns, and I'd like you to replace the commas with semicolons. If you pause the video here and have a go at that activity. Finally, Year 6, Rule 3, the final rule is semicolons are to be used sparingly. So it means we don't use them all the time. If you start using them more and more and more throughout your piece of writing, they lose their effect. It's like when we use exclamation marks or suddenly. If every sentence was to include them, then it would lose its effect completely. In a piece of writing, you should just use them once or twice because you want to show them off. Okay, if you use them all the way through, they lose their effect. Okay, what I'd like you to do now, Year 6, is on Google Classroom, you should hopefully have this task. Now, there's some different activities for you to do. So there's some sentences where you need to insert a semicolon. There's some where we've got questions about semicolons that I'd like you to have a go at answering. And then finally, activity 3, you're going to write some of your own sentences that include semicolons. Okay, enjoy that lesson, Year 6, and please let us know later on Google Classroom at 3:15 how you got on with that today. Have a lovely Tuesday.